Awesome. So now let's say you're a product manager at Netflix and you're in charge of determining whether Netflix should build a co-watching experience. Is that something that you would do? How would you go about thinking about this problem area?
Okay, great. So just to confirm, when you say whether Netflix should build a co-watching experience, that means people in different areas. So people on two different separate devices could press play at the same, basically watch the same thing at the same time without having to call each other and say, all right, three, two, one, and then pressing play. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, great. If I could just take a couple minutes to brainstorm. Okay. Okay. Cool. So first I wanted to think about what Netflix's motivation for this would even be, right? So why would they want to even explore a co-watching feature or experience? So Netflix at the core, they get their revenue from subscriptions, people paying to subscribe to the service each month. And so their goal at the end of the day is always going to be number of paid subscribers. So looking at the competitive landscape, right? So Netflix has quite a few competitors in the space, right? There's Disney Plus, there's Hulu, there's Amazon Prime, there's Apple TV. So basically competition has gotten stiff, right? Like 6 years ago, I would say Netflix was the reigning champion, right? It had the best content library. They have Friends and The Office, right? The most popular shows. They have exclusive shows. They have original content. House of Cards was huge. They have really good recommendation algorithms and great streaming infrastructure on the back end. So that's not to say that Netflix doesn't do that well anymore. They still do. But the thing is, other competitors have caught up, right? Apple TV, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, etc. So those competitors can also do that too, which means Netflix is no longer that differentiated from the other players in the space. So this is where their problem comes in, and probably why I'm assuming they're looking into this co-watching feature. So nowadays, Netflix's main value prop is original content. And it might feel like to you, it definitely feels like to me that they have 20 new original shows a day, right? There's always like a million new stand-up specials and all these new dating reality shows and things like that. The issue is these are really expensive to produce and only a few are unicorns, right? Like the average original series on Netflix is not massively successful. You only hear about the few that are. So it's hard also to compete, have these originals compete when, you know, your competitors have huge IP content like Pixar, Star Wars, Disney, things like that. So therefore, I think Netflix is trying to figure out, all right, how do we build a new moat? What will get us there? And I think exploring co-watching feature means, hey, maybe we can use network effects on that, which currently we don't really have, right? So Netflix today, it's well known that they have a significant amount of number of subscribers. So that's an advantage, right? They probably have more subscribers than, let's say, Apple TV. The issue is Netflix is not very social today. Nobody would call it a social app. If anything, it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to go in my hole and watch Netflix for 10 hours on end by myself, right? So the network is there. There's a lot of people, but the network effects aren't there yet. So there's a lot of potential there to be unlocked, right? So this co-watching feature could tackle that problem head on. Basically, it would give non-subscribers to Netflix fear of missing out, FOMO, right? So, oh no, all my friends are having a Netflix co-watching party of Love is Blind and I don't have a subscription. All right, I'm just going to subscribe so I can hang out with my friends, especially during a time like quarantine where it's already hard enough to keep in touch with people. A side benefit of the co-watching experience that I can see is basically you can't co-watch on the same account would be something that we could build in, right? So it would then force everyone, which is a lot of people who are mooching off someone else's account. So basically like logging into someone else's account and adding your own profile. And I'm not talking about like kids of parents. I'm talking about like friends of friends who have someone else's Netflix password, someone else's iTunes password, etc. So a side benefit of the co-watching feature is, hey, if I actually want to watch the show, I can't use the same account that my friend's using. So I'm actually going to have to be incentivized to then subscribe. Yeah, so I think those are the benefits. But I do think that building this native co-watching experience isn't really worth the time and effort because it already does exist. So you may have heard of Netflix Party. So that's a Google Chrome extension that you can just add to your browser, and it basically adds chat features to the Netflix viewer already. So yes, there are some upsides to Netflix building its own native viewer. So you could integrate better with mobile apps, smart TVs, Roku's, things like that. Have native video chatting, other upgrades. It's always better to control your own stuff, but honestly, Netflix Party gets you 80% of the way there. It's good enough. I would argue it's not worth the engineering time to build a native co-watching experience for marginal improvement. It's pretty expensive. So instead, I'm going to try to think about like other solutions that Netflix could do that make more sense than building a native co-watching experience. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes on that.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So first option, pretty obvious option, is just buying out Netflix Party. That way we can control the roadmap. It's probably an easier way of just already having that technology instead of building a pretty complicated one for incremental value. So that's number one. The second option would be partnering with some big company like Facebook to take advantage of their messaging app, Messenger, Facebook Messenger. So basically letting people co-watch Netflix shows and content straight from the Facebook Messenger app. So this is beneficial to us as Netflix because it improves top of the funnel metrics. So it brings in extra people who use messaging apps but have never used streaming services, right? So we could take this one step further by working with Facebook to make sure that there's an exclusivity deal so that Facebook doesn't integrate with Hulu or Apple TV or Amazon Prime. Any questions about that one?
No, I think that makes sense. So if you were to do this partnership, how would you go about proposing it? Do you, because it's a pretty ambitious goal, right? And you restricted it to Messenger specifically. So I'm curious about that aspect of it. Like, would you reach out specifically to the head of Messenger? What would be your pitch for why they should go specifically there and not on WhatsApp or another platform like Instagram or maybe Facebook native?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I think, to answer your question first of why Messenger and not something like, let's say, Instagram or WhatsApp or something like that. And this could be anecdotal, so obviously we would need to verify all this stuff with not only quantitative data, but also like qualitative user research to see how different people use these different messaging apps. The way I view Facebook Messenger is slightly different than things like Instagram because the main purpose of Messenger is connecting people through chat. And sometimes they also use like video chat as well, definitely, but through that text chat, it's their main feature for Messenger. It's also huge internationally as well. It's not just used in the US. Something like Instagram, I'm more hesitant to use because the main feature I would say is not DMing people, direct messaging people. The main feature is the actual content of like the photos themselves. So it's photos, not text, that Instagram specializes in. So yeah, I think there are some like edge cases where some people use Instagram mostly to get, maybe like a small business. They tend to look at their DMs for people, like using it as like a way to escalate tickets. Like, hey, I called customer support and they're not responding, things like that. But I think in general, Facebook Messenger is the right way to go for that.
Sure, let's proceed with that then. Let's proceed with that assumption, and I like the clarification you made on why and also on the competitors on how you can restrict them by having an exclusivity deal. So yeah, let's move forward with that.
Okay, great. Okay, so my last idea is partnering with smaller companies, so like subreddits, Discord channels, fandom, and basically having these new partners embed Netflix videos so that these creators on these other platforms can do live commentary. They can annotate on top of it, like, "Ooh, look right here. There's a Starbucks cup in the middle of a Game of Thrones episode." They could do voiceovers on their apps and websites for this. So what this is, it's not just co-watching with your friends, which is a great use case. It's co-watching with your entire fan base, right? So think of all these creators who have huge fan bases, who already do like live streams on like Twitch or Instagram stories, things like that. But what if they could do it on top of the actual show themselves? So I know personally, I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier. My Game of Thrones fandom is showing through, but when Game of Thrones was still on, I would watch it on HBO. And then I would close HBO after the episode. I would open up YouTube, and then I would watch all the content I could find of the creators I liked who were commentating on the stuff. And they would basically like show a clip of the video, then they would talk about it, then they would show a clip and like analyze it. That ends up taking tons more time because you're watching the content again. You've already seen it. And ideally it could be, like already done or in real time. And you're experiencing it at the same time. So like, spoiler alert, when Jon Snow dies, you can see their reaction as you're also reacting to it as well, right? It's just much more of a communal experience. So I think that is good because out of all of these users' fan bases, it could bring in more users that have also not used Netflix before, right? It's like that same top of the funnel thing that we would gain from Facebook. And so it also unlocks user-generated content, UGC, which is now going to be locked behind the Netflix paywall. So you're now potentially breaking into a younger generation that Netflix doesn't have a ton of right now, which is Gen Z, right? Gen Z tends to not really flock towards Netflix. They tend towards more like short form content that is more raw, relatable. That raw, relatable item or stuff is going to be the UG stuff behind the Netflix paywall. So now you're entering into a new demographic as well, potentially a new market with the UGC stuff. So with that UGC stuff, it's going to be hard to move that to another streaming service, especially if you have those exclusivity deals. So it's kind of a win-win. So at the end of the day, if you did this, Netflix would become a one-stop shop for content, right? You no longer have to have HBO and YouTube open. You can literally just watch it all on Netflix. So I think the products around network effects that I mentioned above for those 3 items, they're all buildable. Netflix can do it. They have a very talented team. They're very famous for that. But the thing that they can't really build or manufacture out of thin air is fans, right? So I would actually definitely recommend moving forward with that last option for sure, the fandom, Discord, Reddits, to get these annotation embeds because it's not significantly harder of a challenge than what they've done before. Like their team doesn't need to be specialized for that, right? Like they can figure it out. So basically I think they would basically benefit from doing that. But these companies like these subreddit companies are general purpose, right? So if you've ever been on Reddit, they serve fans of everything from movies to games to bands to like funny pictures of sandwiches. And so it doesn't really make sense for a video-focused company like Netflix to acquire the entire company, right? It just makes sense to kind of partner with them. So I would say short term, it makes sense to partner with fandom subreddits to build stickiness. Long term, you can slowly start working on, I'm sure, the long-term deal that with Facebook, and I'm sure it's going to take a while because they're a big company, but because Facebook could unlock, 2 billion people top of funnel, right? Facebook has tons of users. And so I think it's, again, better to take a parallel approach here where it's like short term, building stickiness through fandom and subreddits. Long term, start that contract early, start those discussions with Facebook to increase top of funnel people. I think they have 2 billion versus Netflix is like 200 million paid subs. So I think doing both at the same time would really ensure that we can get a great network effect that is the same as would be, I would say, have much more beneficial impact to Netflix than just building a co-watching Netflix experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I like how you structured it. I like the conclusion that you went to. If you had to go back and give yourself any feedback, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I think I made the assumption that the interviewer is very familiar with Netflix Party, and I think that's maybe an incorrect assumption. I know my friends have used it, but I've personally never even used it, so I think I didn't go too in depth with it, and I probably could have gone more in depth into like what the actual experience is, so they have a full side by side comparison of like what it would actually look like for Netflix.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I think just the overall framework, I was able to understand and follow you the whole way. And like I said, I agree with the end decision there. So thank you.
Thanks.
So this question is really interesting because Netflix is thinking of building a co-watching experience, and we're analyzing whether this makes sense. And Anna correctly identified that the goal is to increase the number of subscribers, and the metric we should look at is the number of paid subscribers. Now, when looking at competitors, she mentioned that a lot of them have a lot of content and it's hard for Netflix to be differentiated. But one thing to know about Netflix that is seen over and over again is out of all of these companies, they're a company that really cares about the user experience. When you first join Netflix and you sign up for a trial, if your trial is about to end and you're about to be charged for the paid amount, they could have just done nothing and let you go onto the paid tier, and they would have made money from you. But they actually proactively inform you and let you know that your free trial is about to end in case you want to cancel it. Even once you're a paid subscriber, if they realize you haven't been logging in and watching, they will actually deactivate your subscription to save you money. And so they've done these steps to make sure that they don't actually keep you continuously being charged, because all they're trying to do here is make sure that there's a good user experience. They don't want people to feel bad that, oh, like Netflix is just charging me, I'm too lazy to cancel it, and so I've just like left it and whatever. I'll watch it when I watch it. They don't want their users to feel that way. They want their users to love the product, to engage with it, and they're doing this for the long-term success and customer happiness by building some of these features. And so when Anna started talking about the co-watching experience, she had a lot of different ideas on how Netflix could roll this out. She realized that they could, rather than building this product, since it already exists as a Chrome extension, they could buy the native co-watching experience with Netflix parties. They could partner with social platforms like Facebook. They could go to other fan-based communities to create these social experiences. But at the end of the day, she kept this design principle and tied it into these ideas of wanting to, in the beginning, the strategic goal that she was trying to hit was make a defensible technology that would differentiate Netflix, but also she kept this design principle that as you're expanding this feature, as you're going on more and more social platforms, you might have these users that aren't being resurrected. They're people who are just not active with Netflix because they're not being socially engaged. But if they realize that their friends are using this, if they realize that there was a show they were watching and now there's a fan-based community around it, they might get reactivated and resurrected and come back on the platform and engage in these social ways where they can talk through and consume this content, and if there's any analysis on it after they watch an episode that just got released, they can have those sort of discussions and facilitate that group dynamic, because that's really important in building not only the social elements, but making sure that there's long-term sustainability and stickiness with the content and with the other people and the communities on the platform.
With our courses, you will go from being a candidate to being the candidate. Sign up below to attend a PM interview webinar where we mock interview an expert PM from Google to show you what 10 out of 10 interview responses look like.